Hello to those who can't make it, and welcome to Flight Controls, your personal CBT help. I'm here to sort of, like as usual, take the CBTs from here and look over the slides and make it maybe like this much to study instead of this much to study. So we're on slide number 5. I don't think you can see me when I have the slides over here, and that's the only thing I'm, you know what? It just occurred to me that you guys can probably see me doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see you in the top corner.
Yep.
The people watching the video later, okay, hey, look at that. That's me in the middle. How do I make me bigger? Pin video?
Hi, Mason.
Hi. You can have like my little tiny talking head right at the top of the slides. I'm getting into this. It's weird. I'm getting into this. I'm kind of getting into homeschooling the kids too.
It's like a big sleepover.
We're taking the CBT, yeah, it is, from here, and we're making it maybe this much for you to study. So if you don't know what a primary flight control is by now, I've got some numbers you can call. You can call the registrar. You can get yourself. I'm just kidding.
Sorry for being late.
No worries. Hello. So spoilerons are the spoileron function of the multi-function spoilers is your new primary flight control that you've never dreamed of before, but it boosts the ailerons. So what does an aileron do? And how do I look at the rest of the class if I'm on this? Okay. Micah, how do ailerons move? Show me. Are you on video?
Hello.
Like
A wire.
No, I'm saying, do ailerons move like this or do they go like this?
Oh, like that.
Like this. Opposite each other. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what about spoilers? How do they move?
Spoilers both go up.
Yes, they both go up. They don't go down because they're on the top of the wing. Spoilers exist to spoil lift, and therefore the spoileron function of the multifunction spoilers, if you wanted to be spoilers, they both go up, right? So what's the function of the multifunction spoilers in terms of helping the ailerons? How does that work?
Don't
Like
spoil
a
it.
B-52.
Wait, one person at a time. Let me see here. Who's on mute that I can totally take by? Matt Martinez. Okay. Have you done your CBTs? Experience?
Okay. Done the CBT. No, I haven't done the CBT yet.
Okay, so I won't ask you. Somebody that's done the CBTs, the spoileron function of the multifunction spoilers. Probably Hunter, right?
I actually only had to use the PowerPoint for the homework, so I'm like halfway through the CBT for this section, but the spoilerons just kind of assist in yaw and roll by creating drag on that side rather than deflecting air. So it's more like a drag flap than a true aileron.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get the double whammy effect when you turn on the aileron. It's a little less pronounced. If your ailerons for some crazy reason fail, the spoileron function, or if one side fails, you can actually eliminate one and just use the spoileron to turn. So they're pretty handy in that way. All right, so let me just size this down. All I can see is Hunter. That's hilarious. I'm really good at this. So far, I'm doing great. Pin, unpin, I don't know. So rudders, yaw control. Elevators are the worst ones to lose. We all know this. It would be very bad if you lost your elevators. I usually tell my story about my boss losing his elevators, and he won an award for landing that airplane that day, but they call it the Tunner Award for safety. He used a tie-down strap from the back of the C-130, looped it through the yokes, and managed to pull on the elevators just enough to get it on the ground without any boost at all. So the boost pack had dumped all the fluid. In this airplane, if you lose hydraulic fluid in all 3 systems, you're pretty much gonna die, so don't do that. As far as the primary flight controls, they have cables, pulleys, push rods, and the good old-fashioned newfangled PCUs, the power control units. Everything is redundant, triple redundant, and especially redundant when it comes to the elevators. All right. If you have total electrical power failure, you get AC motor pump 3B through the ADD. Secondaries, still the same as what you're used to, slats and flaps. The ground spoilers are sort of new. I'm going to ask you questions on your quizzes about when they come out. So weight on wheels logic and all those numbers associated with the spoilers are the number one thing I ask you. You guys should be pretty well versed on how an elevator works. So my theory is the ground spoilers and multifunction spoilers are probably the most important thing to study for this unit. We got 2 spoilers on each wing. So outboards and inboards. The outboards are the only ones that are known as spoilerons. Inboards only have actual spoilers. And then spoiler stabilizer control units, or SSCUs, they automatically. There's your multiple spoilers. Whoever's like making a bunch of background noise, mute yourself, please. Thank you very much. Where were we? Ailerons are on the outboards, and then multifunction spoilers are right here. Once again, the outboard ones are the aileron assists. Think about it that way. Ailerons are always outboard of the flaps, and the outboard function of the spoiler, the outboard multifunction spoilers work with the ailerons. Okay. Whatever, who cares? Okay, so you got a flutter damper, dampener, or damper, I don't care how you call it. It just makes sure the aileron doesn't flutter in the wind. These things are controlled with torque tubes, cables, rods. You can see the pulleys, cables, and rods. If you're asked on a test if you have fly-by-wire flight controls, what is the answer?
No. No.
You do not have fly-by-wire. A lot of people, for some reason, think we have auto throttles and fly-by-wire in the CRJ, even people who've been all the way through the course. So don't make that mistake. Multifunction spoilers, I kind of already gave you my little 2 cents on those. Very important that you study these. Electrically controlled, hydraulically operated. Key bullet. Okay. And the spoiler on function, I'm trying to move this so you guys can see. SSCU 1 and 2 receive the electrical signal, and then that determines the deflection. It's all very automatic, so if you want to use the spoiler on function, you're not going to know how far they're out, but you will see these white arrows as they move out. See the white arrows on the synoptic page? Okay. Flutter dampers, prevent flutter. It's all hydraulic fluid left. Gust lock on the ground. Aileron disconnect. Why in the world do we have an aileron disconnect? Jonah, why do we need this thing?
God. Oh, it's for when it's like jammed?
Yeah, you know the real reason why we need this? It is not for any, see, I didn't have an aileron disconnect. It's because you're gonna fly part 121 with a CRJ, and the FAA mandates this. That's really the reason why you have them. I asked the MESA instructor, hey, have you ever even heard of a situation where you actually need to disconnect anything? Ailerons, elevators, anything like that? And he said, nope, never happened. Literally never happened. But because you're flying passengers, the FAA mandates that you have this safety system. So if you do disconnect this by pulling the roll, disconnect handle, and turning it, then basically left wheel moves the left aileron. So the pilot in command, or the captain, moves that side, and the right control wheel moves the right aileron. They make you do this in the sim when you're a new hire, and it's kind of comical. They actually showed a video of 2 pilots trying to land the airplane by flying simultaneously. It's much harder than it looks. Anyone ever done a dance with someone without stepping on their feet? Like that. So,
Ouch.
yeah. You're not a good dancer, you're not going to be a good pilot.
Kind of reminds me of like Pacific Rim or pretty much any like other giant robot show that needs 2 pilots.
Yeah, exactly. You have to literally fly in sync with each other. Or if your co-pilot sucks, you just say, let go, grab both yokes, and fly yourself. That would be me because I'm a control freak. Just kidding. Aileron disconnect with this roll select and the button. How many of you got stuck on this for 10,000 years in the CPT? Or at least 45 minutes? I'm not saying totally disconnect it and don't know what it does, but I'm saying don't study it in the greatest depth because I asked you no questions on it. So I'm going to move on. I think it's important that you know the handles there and that you can disconnect the ailerons. I also ask you a question about which pilot controls which aileron. However, when it gets into all this SSUs, pilot roll, co-pilot roll, all those buttonology things in the CBTs, no. So aileron jam, all this illuminates 20 seconds. Just take it with a grain of salt.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you reconnect it in flight if you disconnect it?
No. Bungee breakout basically disconnects it and it's unconnectable. So don't do it by accident or because you're messing around. That would be bad. Let's see. Pilot roll and co-pilot roll switch illuminates on the operable side. None of that stuff is asked in any test that I've made. There may be a one or two quiz questions buried deep in a bank that Professor Vessel made up a long time ago, but I don't think so. I think I filtered them all out because this is the kind of thing that you don't need to know until you're a co-pilot. So basics, right? Rudder has 3 PCUs because it's the most important. It's got the most redundancy. I would know that. Spring tension breakout for the rudder. If you do jam a rudder, it's going to be harder to move it even after you do the jam or breakout protection. It's not like the elevators. I mean, excuse me, it's not like the ailerons. It's still somewhat jammed, but additional force is required to move the rudder. Also get on the ground ASAP. With any sort of flight control malfunction, obviously we're all going to go ahead and land to the best of our ability. Don't rush it though. Has anyone ever experienced a flight control malfunction in their lives yet?
Nope.
Alex?
You have? Isaiah?
No, I have not. I think Alex has, though.
Oh, wow. Did it take you a while to figure out exactly how to land? Alex?
I don't know what these accusations are. I've never had a flight control issue in my life.
I never have either, knock on wood. I have a wood desk I'm knocking on right now. But they used to fail stuff in the sim that was going to be really, really bad in the landing flare. And so what we had to do is go up to altitude and practice basically configuring and getting down to speed, to landing speed, totally configured to make sure we knew exactly where the airplane was going to stall. If there's any kind of flight control malfunction, you probably end up doing that just to make sure. Last thing you want to do is stall 10 feet above the ground because you didn't do a controllability check. That's what we called it, controllability check. So here's your anti-jam breakout mechanism. Okay, push on it hard enough and it will break out. Rudder travel limiter. So any questions on the rudder before I move on from the anti-jam breakout mechanism? Do the CBTs on that one. I do ask you a couple of questions about the difference between the way the aileron disconnect and the rudder anti-jam breakout mechanism works. RTLs, we like rudder travel limiters because we don't, basically don't want to over stress the vertical stab. You don't want to tail strike. So it knows where your flap handle is. It knows what your airspeed is. If you're on the ground, the engine state, things like that. And it will basically limit your rudder. So you don't pull the rudder off the airplane. Not good. Okay. Rudder travel limiters have not always existed in these large jets. They had issues with rudders breaking off. I think there's a couple of really notable accidents. I can't think of the actual accident. Should probably looked it up before class, but people have ripped rudders off, so that's why this exists. Notice on the synoptic page, you've got these little white brackets. That tells you what you're limited to in rudder travel. So even if you stand on the rudder, completely stand on one side, it'll only go to there at a certain airspeed. Airspeed's the biggest input here. Okay. So high speed, you get very little because that's more pressure on the rudder if you do move it really fast. Medium speed, a little bit more, and then low speed, you get a lot of rudder travel. If the status message comes up, you have a loss of redundancy, I would take that as an emergency and go ahead and land. So a rudder limiter would be kind of an emergency. QRH, run the checklist, and go land. All right, yaw dampers. Again, something else that's a newfangled technology we've come up with because basically the people in the back of the bus were getting thrown around. No fun. Stability, damping. You got to have a yaw damper engaged so that you can engage the autopilot. It won't engage without that. All right, there you go. Do look over the CBTs for more details on yaw damper 1 and 2. When to disengage them. When they're malfunctioning, right? You can disengage them automatically. As far as elevators, you got the 3 PCUs controlling it, and the right control wheel is connected to the right elevator PCU because that's logical. Okay. Moving on. That is actually, Jack, you called it. Lincoln Elementary is calling me right now. Oh, yeah. That's funny. I'm gonna turn my ringer off just like we're in class. Oops. So you can see all the PCUs controlling the elevators. These are all very important redundancies. The pitch feel is something they give you on the yoke, even though technically it's all sort of electronic like switches. Your inputs create switches and electronic signals, and the cables and the pulleys input that to the huge hydraulic force. So this pitch feel mechanism is more to give you a real feeling like you're doing something than what you're actually doing. What's the stick pusher for? I'm trying to find someone who's not muted. Casey, what's a stick pusher for?
To prevent the plane from stalling.
Sort of. You can still stall this one. This is not an Airbus. So if you do stall it, it will eventually actually stall, but it'll try to push, and you can overcome it with stupidity and keep stalling it if you like those guys at the 410 Club that we talked about in class. Here, once again, this pitch disconnect handle will disconnect the 2 sides of your elevator. So again, an FAA rule. Nothing has ever been actually done or used before in that regard. Okay, questions on the pitch disconnect? Kind of exactly the same thing as the aileron disconnect, only for your elevator. Trim indications on the ground are different than in the sky. On the ground you get this white, but you still get this green ready, I guess, range for the stab trim. Excuse me, green on the ground, GG, green on the ground, white in the air. Sorry. What else? Aileron trim switches. I never used an aileron trim switch in my life. We had one, but I didn't exactly use it. I guess if you're flying a long way with a crosswind, you might use it. So if you're droning a long way, say across the ocean, you would. I used rudder trim usually only when engine out. And of course, stab trim you use continuously throughout the flight. Okay. I'm not going to get too heavy into rudder and aileron trim. It exists. It's spring-loaded to the center position. That's all you got to do. Oh, and it's logical. So if you go right with it, it goes nose right. The actual nose goes right. So get used to it real quick on the job. Horizontal stab trim. This is the one that's really important. You got a massive jack screw. If you haven't seen one, I have a picture in this presentation. I'll show you. Actually, this is just a schematic, but it is a big, huge screw that moves the entire section. Basically, the entire horizontal stab moves.
So it's more like a stabulator?
More like a stabulator, exactly. So this thing with its high, the high horizontal stab.
T-tail.
Tail, yeah, in other words. It needs a bigger change to actuate the trim, and it needs a bigger deflection because you're not in the slipstream from the engines. So for example, on a C-130, when I moved my trim, it moved a trim tab not too far. That blown lift over the wings with those 4 props is really powerful. So just aerodynamic, my 2 cents on that. Okay, horizontal stab. Position indicators on ED2, ICAS 2, and the flight control synoptic page. There's your switches. There's a two-sided switch because it's an electrical control, basically preventative for runaway trim. Both sides have to go to ground in order to move the trim. So if one side malfunctioned and just started firing randomly electrons, the other side not engaged would counteract it. It wouldn't work. It's very rare to see runaway trim these days. It used to happen more often back in the day. In fact, I had a colleague, a coworker who had runaway trim, and it was really scary. That's why you got to know where the trim circuit breakers are so you can electrically cut that off if it happens to you. This one, as far as I know, I don't think there's ever been runaway trim in a CRJ. Here's your stab markings. They actually put markings on the airplane for how far it can move. I'm not going to ask you the numbers. Also not going to ask you the takeoff range, 3.6 to 11.6 increments of 0.1. Who cares? What you need to know as a pilot is to be in the ground, the green range on the ground, so you're ready to go for takeoff. If you're an AS435 or you've had it and you've looked at the Airbus, it actually tells you on like a center panel whether or not you're ready to go and all your stab trims are in place. It just says takeoff config okay. This one you actually have to go ahead and look on this page, look on the status page and look at the greens.
It's nice.
Yeah. What, the Airbus or the CRJ?
The CRJ, when it says takeoff config, okay. Airbus has it too, but you have to click to a whole different page to do it.
Yeah. Well, all these airplanes are so smart. I can't even begin to tell you. I had no idea where my trim was. I just had to center it. Old school. Horizontal stab trim priority. I can't explain why, but this question is 3 or 4 different wordings of it are in your quizzes. So just remember this. So the trim priority, if the captain trims the airplane, even if you're flying, which is kind of rude, the captain starts trimming the airplane, it's going to trim. If you trim and the captain starts trimming at the same time, he or she's going to override you. I guess it makes sense. Autopilot has 2 rates, and I asked you a why question on this on the test. How come? And I think we already talked about this. I feel like this is, have we not talked about this already in this class? The why question, give me a, have we talked about this? No? I don't know.
I don't remember.
I'm
I don't
opening.
think so.
Just in case, we should go over it again.
Okay, so who's smart on when you're moving flaps, what happens to the airplane?
Pitch up.
Pitch up.
Yeah, it pitches. It pitches up, so you've got to run the trim down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it can be a kind of, especially with a big airplane and a massive flap, the bigger the flaps, the more pronounced this is. When you do move the flaps, the whole thing pitches violently, and you know, the passengers in the first class section, they don't want to spill their wine. It's really important not to do that to them. So the higher rate when the flaps are extending or retracting, for the autopilot basically makes it a much smoother input. If the flaps are stationary, the autopilot trims at a lower rate. Got it? So you can answer your essay question on that by telling me that there's 2 rates. The high rate when your flaps are moving is because the first class passengers don't want to spill their booze. Okay, horizontal stab trim priority. I'm gonna get rid of this video here over just a sec. What do I want to say about this? Auto trim. So basically the human beings actually have priority over the airplanes when it comes to trimming. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. If auto trim starts trimming and you decide you don't want it, you take the trim, it'll trim based on your inputs, and mock trim has the least priority. The clacker happens after trim's been in motion more than 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time to be running trim. It thinks it's run away at that point, so it probably has if you've gone over 3 seconds. This is an interesting slide. Just know that on autopilot, you get the high and the low rate. Captain and first officer, so human rates are always high rate. And then mock trim is really small inputs. Oh my gosh, we've talked enough about trims. I'm gonna keep going here. If mock trim is in op, you can disengage it, but you're going to fly slower and you're going to go ahead and land. Okay. I'm going to talk about that too much. Mock tuck is an aerodynamic situation. The faster you fly, basically, the pressure moves rearward. And I have a very technical term for this. It's called wonkiness, squirreliness. The airplane gets very squirrely as the center of pressure moves rearward because you got more up front. So squirrely, we don't like squirrely. So the mock trim actually, if the autopilot's off and you're hand flying, you can get this nose down tendency. Mock trim corrects that.
Professor, real quick.
Yep.
Just so you know, it's saying remaining meeting time 2 minutes, just so you know.
I think what they're doing right now is they're overriding that because of this whole Corona Armageddon right now, and they're letting me go on. I think it's going to pop up with some sort of prompt, and then I'll just continue, hopefully.
But if
So
not, it's been nice seeing everyone.
It won't cut it off, or
I don't think
We don't know.
What happened with the last one? It just said you've been upgraded.
Yeah, I
And then
remember
it
that
just
one.
went on.
the
Okay.
CEO of Zoom is helping us out. They're helping us during this time of need. Thank you, CEO of Zoom, if you're watching.
Because the school doesn't want to pay for it, so.
Don't blame them.
I think I found something new out today. I was in a meeting with leadership, and they do Zoom via Microsoft Teams. I'm too lazy to figure it out, so I like this. This works. I've been uploading these to YouTube, and by the way, there's a huge delay because it takes like 5 hours with my computer unlocked and running to actually do the upload. And then YouTube has to vet once I post it on YouTube, somebody, I guess, has to watch the whole thing, so it takes a while. As far as, let's get back to flight controls, you got the spoiler handle, retract and extend, symmetrical deployment of all 4 MFS panels. Okay. Oh, hey, it's automated. It's animated. How exciting. Okay. Extender spoilers below 300 feet AGL. You can't be about to hit the ground and have the spoilers out. It's actually more tempting than it seems, because if you're high and you're fast and you're coming in hot, gosh, people tend to delay retracting their spoilers on purpose. But if something happens where you actually